Good morning, everyone. I like memes. I think that they're interesting. We've got a few to start the show today. So first is a real pandemic wouldn't need a marketing campaign. Very true. Very true. And the 24/7 marketing campaign that this one has is very, very interesting. Here's another one. If there was a contraceptive vaccine, but after taking it, you could still get pregnant and you still had to use a condom, would you still take it? What kind of protection does this offer? 60%? Right? Fry eyes. This one, when it loaded, made me actually kind of chuckle out loud. So this one's good. The virus, the variant. Yikes. And here's an update on a story I ran yesterday. The free postcards we're all getting. Here's where to send them. 80 Wellington Street in Ottawa, the Prime Minister's office, right? It says, "Dear Mr. Prime Minister, please resign. Thank you." Thanks. Here is, okay. Yesterday, I've been banging, maybe I'm going too deep on this story. Maybe I'm finding this story too personal. This is the equivalent of the people in long-term care being locked up. If they could keep our children in the schools locked up, they'd do that too. The abuse is rampant, and they don't seem to care. Here's a follow-up story from Anthony Furey, and they're trying to silence him. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll look at schools and the infection rate in schools after some testing in Ontario. And but first, here is Anthony Furey with an update to yesterday's story on the self-isolation of children, the putting them in the hole. Thank you to the commenter who put that in there. That was the term I was looking for. Solitary confinement, put them in the hole. Yeah. Ontario backs isolation of potentially exposed children, but says common sense is needed. A follow-up story to the government's rather ambiguous response to the child solitary isolation issue. Yes, it is quite ambiguous, and I think that it's funny that they say common sense is needed. This was under threat of fine. You got a letter saying your kid is now a high-risk contact, and if you don't do what this letter says, and that means isolate them, in a bedroom by themselves most of the time, and if they're not isolated in a bedroom by themselves, they have to be masked, then you were at risk of a $5,000 per day fine. Common sense says follow the law that doesn't get you the fine. It says, sorry kid, get in there, Timmy. We're not celebrating your birthday this week. I don't care if you only turn 8 once. Get in there. We could all get sick because of you germ carrying sack of somebody who was in a class with somebody who got sick and tested positive for COVID-19. This isn't damaging at all. Has anybody consulted with a child psychologist? No? Has anybody talked to a child psychologist about masking? Potential, or the prolonged masking of children? Anyway, let's focus. We'll get into the other bits later. Ontario backs isolation, blah, blah, blah. The Ontario government says parents need to use, quote, common sense when it comes to isolating children who have been dismissed from class or childcare because they may have been exposed to COVID-19. But health officials apparently believe it's still best for kids to be completely isolated alongside one caregiver and then for both of them to be kept away from the rest of the family. Quote, "We know that if somebody may have COVID-19, we would like them to be isolated for up to 14 days, said Dr. Yaff, Ontario's Associate Chief Medical Officer of Health, at a news conference on Monday. However, we obviously understand that you can't leave a child alone. You have to use common sense. Common sense like, if you don't follow this health order, you will be fined $5,000 per day? Do you have that money?" Yaff offered no insight as to what the government's interpretation of common sense might entail. The comments come after Peel Region Health apologized for issuing previous guidelines to parents that instruct them to isolate their children, even small ones, completely alone from everyone else for 14 days. Anyone exposed to COVID-19 is directed to self-isolate at home, away from others in the home as much as possible. That includes children, says one part of the social media apology from the region of Peel. We'll look at that in a second. For children, we know that a caregiver may need to isolate with them to help with daily living, such as feeding, clothing, and emotional support. While Yaff said at a news conference that parents should consult with local public health units for specific guidelines, the region of Peel passed the buck back to the province, saying that they're in their post that the broader directive about children and self-isolation was set by the province. Yaff and the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. David Williams, have previously maintained that contact tracing reveals that there has hardly been any in-class transmission at schools. The Sun brought up this point and asked why children would even need to be kept indoors for 14 days and away from most family members when the likelihood of them having actually caught the virus from another child is, according to the government's own statements, extremely small. In response, YAF blamed recent concerns about new variants. Quote, "We want to be extra careful and make sure we minimize spread," said YAF in defending the need for children to self-isolate. That answer isn't enough for Dr. Fulford, an assistant professor at McMaster and infectious disease physician at Hamilton Health Sciences, who focuses on pediatrics. Quote, "I would certainly not dispute the need for quarantine when deemed necessary. However, as it stands, the current policies appear to be explicitly advocating for the isolation of children, including young children," said Fullard. There are ways that one can quarantine without it being so incredibly harmful to children, and one obvious place to start is to let kids play outside, added Fulford. The risk of transmission outdoors is vanishingly low. Dr. Lowe, Peel's medical officer of health, responded to the controversy at a separate Monday news conference by saying their guidelines were an error made on a communication product which has since been removed and is currently being revised. However, the specific guidance sent to parents from other public health units across Ontario still calls for kids to be kept at home and away from others as much as possible. For example, Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph Public Health Unit's guidelines sent out to children's staff who are high-risk contacts, HRCs, darn Clinton, of confirmed positive COVID-19 cases must remain home and self-isolate for 14 days. And then refer to Public Health Ontario guidelines, which says, as much as possible, stay in a separate room away from other people in your home and use a separate bathroom if you have one. The question answered by Dr. Lowe was initially put to Ontario Premier Doug Ford, but Ford referred the question to Health Minister Christine Elliott, who in turn referred the question to Dr. Lowe. Dr. Lowe should be fired. Nobody should be recommending kids be abused by their parents. And yet, here we are. Public health recommending at the provincial level, no, that's fine. Abuse the kids. We've got to worry about those variants. But that's not backed up by the data. I'm sorry, it's not. And they cycled up the PCR counts as well. I've talked about this before. They changed it on February 15th or 16th. And since that date, cases have started to go up. Now they've got their around 1,000 cases. They can keep us in red and locked down forever. That's the goal. This is garbage. But that's what's going to happen, right? We're not getting out of this for summer, guys. I'm getting this wrong. This doctor, tweeted, a systemic review of observational studies showed that in those studies with low risk of bias, school closures had no discernible effect on SARS-CoV-2 transmission. The lockdown shit show continues to be exposed. Do not make kids wear masks. And here's it's a BMJ, so it's BMJ hosts scientific studies. Here is Ottawa School. Weekend COVID-19 clinic finds 0 cases after 1,004 people were tested. So zero cases, right? These are asymptomatic people. Is that not instructive? Here is a testimonial we received from an educator in Eastern Ontario on what goes on in classrooms. Children chew on their masks. They touch their masks and their faces constantly. They leave their masks everywhere, outside, on the schoolyard, and on the classroom floor. They touch worn masks that don't belong to them. It's absolutely the most unsanitary thing you've ever seen. I've witnessed a teacher put sanitizer on a kindergartner's hands after he said no and was attempting to hide his hands. I've witnessed a teacher tell children multiple times that they can't just get up and walk around because COVID. It is a sad state of affairs in our schools for so many reasons, honestly. And, you've always got to be considering your position, and if things change fundamentally in the school, then you've got to be able to move with it. But what's going on in the schools is nothing short of abuse, and I'll show you clearly. Here's the communique that Mr. Dr. Lowe was saying is wrong, right? This is the explicit what to do if your child is dismissed from school or childcare because they're a high risk person. Now they're somebody who's in a class. They're asymptomatic, but they've been in a classroom with somebody who tested positive. The child must self-isolate, which means stay in a separate bedroom, eat in a separate bedroom, eat in a separate room apart from others, separate bathroom if possible. If the child must leave the room, they should wear a mask and stay 2 meters apart from others. This is psychological abuse, as directed by Public Health in Peel Region. Like, I hope there's lawsuits, and I hope these people pay through the nose. Honestly. And here's the threat of fine. Okay, this is the second page of that. It says, please note your child will be required to self-isolate at home for the full 14 days, even with a negative COVID-19 test result. Self-isolation is required under the law as per Section 22 class order. Failure to follow the self-isolation requirement may result in a fine of up to $5,000 per day. It's sad. It's sad what's happened to our country. It's sad. It's sad that education is being perverted to bring people in line with the COVID insanity, right? People want to be left alone. People want to get back to their normal lives. They don't want to deal with this. And this is evil. It's evil. These people are evil. Here is Toronto Public Health. This is Patrick Brown calling for the repeal of this criminal and evil policy from the Peel Region School Board, etc. And Rachel says, now since Toronto Public Health and EP de Villa have ordered the same thing in the city of Toronto, will you be having her remove it as well from the TDSB recommendations, John Tory? I think she's asking. And, well, she's asking Toronto Public Health, but, oh yeah, she linked John Tory in there. But I'm wondering if this should be province-wide. Where is the Minister Elliott? Where are these people who should be weighing in on this? This is the apology made by Peel. I'm not going to read it all, but I think that it's proof positive that they got so much heat that they needed to walk this back, and that's encouraging. But at the same time, where's the province? You would think that it's not just the region of Peel saying, "Okay, hold on a second. Yeah, we're not recommending you abuse your kids, everyone. Sorry about that. Haha, just kidding." Where's the province? Where's the medical officer of health? Where's Dr. Tam? Where's the minister of health? Where's Christine Elliott coming out strongly against this? She's not. She's like, oh, actually, you just need a parent to self-isolate. What if you're a single parent with 3 kids in different grades? So you're going to go self-isolate with the kindergartner, right? Yeah, that's going to work. Or you're going to self-isolate the kindergartner? Get real. Like this is, it doesn't even make sense. It's stupid. It's stupid. These people are abusive and stupid, and they think we're stupid. Honestly. Here's David Feisman thinking we're stupid. This is them trying to shut down Anthony Furey and Randy Hillier for pointing out the abuse inherent in the recommendations by public health. This is an Ontario Science Table member. This guy is massive conflict of interest. He's a quack doctor, and he's recommending the Science Table, making recommendations to the Premier based on what the EFTO is paying him for. Right? I don't know what conclusion to draw, Mr. Conflict of Interest, quack Dr. Fissman, right? But anyway, he says this, it's time to get the hateful, damaging, malicious disinformation off this platform. You know what to do, and you know what you need to do. You know how to do it, and you know what you need to do. And he's tagged Twitter support, Twitter safety, Twitter Canada, Twitter. I don't like what these people are saying, so get them off my platform. And I'm going to tell Doug Ford exactly what the EFTO told me to say. Can't open schools yet because data, because variants, because fear. This is not what a doctor does, honestly. Spending all day on Twitter, fighting with people, it's ridiculous. Stroking his ego for nothing. What a quack, honestly. This is the Adrienne Batra, and I don't know how she gets the fancy font. Like, that's an interesting font. Anyway, she is editor-in-chief of the Toronto Sun, and she says the Toronto Sun stands by the article below, and is extremely troubling. A member of the Ontario Science Table is attempting to silence a journalist whose work resulted in a swift policy change that was potentially harmful to children. Yeah, I mean, isn't that weird? Isn't that a strange thing for a doctor to do, right? Silence these people who are advocating that we stop abusing children. Isn't that strange for a doctor to say? Man, I don't know what other conclusion I could draw. No doctor that I know that's worth their weight would advocate for continued child abuse, I guess, right? Anyway, Lisa says, is COVID stopped by recess bowls or cohorts or excessive hand sanitizer or no opportunity to breathe fresh air and no sports, no clubs, no social activities? Show me the data that these measures stop COVID. Why are we abusing our children? Why are we allowing school boards to abuse our children? Why are we allowing public health to abuse our children? Why are we allowing them to de facto give parents permission to abuse their children? Why isn't anybody on the Ontario Science Table talking about it? Why aren't people speaking up about it? Instead, they're trying to silence people about it. This doesn't give me a lot of hope for the future when the MPs, Mr. Tony Clement, Honorable Tony Clement, he's an MP. Oh, I thought he was an MP. He's not an MP. Anyway, I thought he was a sitting MP. I'm going to double check. Hold on here. He did not run in 2019. So I guess it was the honorable, the currentness of the name that made me think he was current. Anyway, he's not. But he was saying, day 2 of Muskoka lockdown, so unfair. Let's find ways to support our distressed businesses. #Muskoka. And I just was incredulous that there was no way that we could fight this. Like that I guess now former, I thought he was current MPs were lamenting there's, it's unfair. It's like, what's the little guy like us going to do, right? Like how are we going to fight this if people like like connected people, former health ministers, etc., are stuck in the same quagmire, right? They're stuck in the same trap we're stuck in. So, hope for the future. I don't know. Temper that with, I don't know, opportunity for a vacation property in Mexico. I don't know. Anyway, Blacklock's reporter shows emails show Justin Trudeau misled public over pandemic response. Aides schemed to try and talk around it in case anyone noticed. Yeah, right? Like let's not be straight up about what's going on and about what we know, which is kind of the hallmark of this Trudeau government. Like from SNC Lavalin to Phoenix Pay to all of the other scandals through the Liberal years. It's been one scandal to the next, and each one everybody's kind of like, well, the first couple I thought this will definitely bring them down, and as I watched each one not really meaningfully change the government except removing influential women from cabinet, other than that it really didn't change anything, right? So here we sit. Here's Holly Doan. She says, there's something going on in China. Commons Committee told Chinese Canadians were alert to pandemic more than a month before Public Health Agency. I think anybody who was paying attention to the internet was more alert than our public health agency in Canada. They were telling us we were racist if we were saying, something's happening in China. And they were like, I'm pretty sure that's anti-Asian racism right there. Everybody went, what? Yeah. And I mean, that was Patty Haydu. That was the line. That was what was being sold as accurate information, right? If the Canadian health services hadn't heard about it, it was disinformation, dangerous disinformation. Just like those isolation hotels, dangerous misinformation. We'll get to those in a minute too. But dangerous misinformation until you're locked in a Gulag hotel, right? Okay. And yes, I do mean Gulag hotel. Alberta, moving back to Alberta and talking about COVID. We'll move cautiously to step 2 of the path forward in a targeted easing of restrictions while maintaining strong measures to limit the spread of COVID-19. I don't know what Kenny's game is. I don't know what's going on. It seems like he's giving the public what it wants. And there's going to be a big push from press and media and all sorts of people in Alberta and outside to close back down because they're worried of another wave and blah, blah, blah. And when it doesn't happen and the press dies, because BC's been open, right? They've had schools open. I don't think they have mandatory masks in BC. There's all sorts of things that are Ontario only. We're very, very locked down. We're a very stringently locked down place. And Alberta's going to go in that direction, maybe. But I don't know if it'll stay. I don't know if it will continue to stay as opened up as they're aiming for or whatever. But anyway, I guess good news. Hold your breath because it may evaporate, right? Here is what is going on here. Why is Premier Kenny and the media have been telling us our ICUs are near capacity? Here's a news article from the Western Standard. Despite COVID-19, Alberta ICU admissions dropped in 2020. So this is the same stuff I was talking about. It goes back to the idea that the numbers really don't matter. And they basically enable lockdowns kind of whenever they want, right? It's one of those things where they'll justify it after. They'll come up with a justification after. Oh, the case numbers were high. We've got to like the lockdown in December. There was no justification for that. Guelph didn't need to go into a lockdown. We were in red numbers, right? And oh no, we've got these high numbers. We got to lock down. Whatever. This is the Milgram experiment explained. This is a video, 10-minute video, very concise. I thought it was pretty well done. That explains what's going on now. The Milgram experiment, more detail with the teachers and the learners, and anybody who disobeys on the masks, they're the learners. Anybody who is a teacher is somebody who's saying you have to wear a mask. They're the people administering the shock. And the people who are the authority figures, the people with the doctor's coat, that's public health. That's anybody who's given power, who's given real power, who can say you have to do this. But public health doesn't have teeth. They can't really do anything. They don't have powers to suspend students. They don't have powers to remove people from anywhere. They don't have powers to close buildings unless and Scalia is going to create the legal precedent on this, I think. But I think that there's already kind of a framework of legal precedent that public health doesn't have a right to assume ownership of a building to shut it down. And they don't have the first day that Skelly was open, they wanted to shut it down then. They didn't have the legal authority to do it. They had to come up with a legal authority, a legal framework to do it for the next day. Yeah, look it up. There's a reason that they didn't move in and shut it down on the first day. And then they came in 3 days later with the big show, right? And it wasn't because they were being nice. It's because they did not have the legal authority to do anything. Anyway, this is a good documentary. It's 10 minutes long, totally worth it. And it really puts it into perspective, much better than I have. I'm just saying, hey, there's a correlation here. This person has thought about this and like matched it up and done a really good job, I think, of bringing in current video footage and the old documentary footage and splicing it together to tell a story of what's happening to us and what we're doing to ourselves, because we are doing this to ourselves. Okay, BC to offer second dose, getting into the vaccine and vaccinations. This is all COVID related, I suppose. BC to offer second dose of COVID vaccine after 4 months. To me, this is Pfizer. The only part of the article that talks about Pfizer is this underneath the picture. So I don't actually know if this article is talking about Pfizer because it says second dose of COVID vaccine. It doesn't say in the article that they're talking specifically about Pfizer, as far as I can see. And so it says, British Columbia will extend the time between first and second doses of COVID-19 vaccine to 4 months as it ramps up its age-based immunization plan. Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says the change is based on the miraculous protection of at least 90% from the first dose of Pfizer-BioNTech. Oh, there it is. Ha. Oh, well, I missed that, I guess. And Moderna vaccines. So it's miraculous, this 90%. And this has, I guess, been seen in Israel. With their testing, and they're finishing up the first doses over in Israel. And because of that, Canada's making the decision to extend the dosing regime. And I think that it's really strange. And I've talked about this before, that like a Canadian doctor who's the doctor of public, like who's the public health officer, can just say, yeah, we're going to extend the timeline on this to 4 months. When Pfizer and Moderna, as far as I know, and I don't know if they've changed their guidelines after the end of the Israel test, because Helsinki protocols were enacted, and there was concern that it was not invalid, but that they wouldn't get the data because there was no informed consent. People were told it was a safe vaccine, not that it was an experimental vaccine. So I don't know if there's been like a change with regard to the dosing schedule, because Pfizer and Moderna have independently said we're seeing such success that one's good and you can extend this, blah blah blah. But up until literally today, the direction that I've seen from the manufacturers of Pfizer and Moderna have said 45 days, 90 at a push. So is 94 months, 93 months, right? 30 days, 90. So it seems interesting that we're just like having public health officers. Now, I miss things, right? Like I just missed this. So maybe something has changed. But it seems weird that they're not referencing they're saying the change is made because of the miraculous protection of at least 90% from the first dose. But that's Dr. Bonnie Henry saying that. That's not Pfizer saying that or Moderna saying that. Moderna and Pfizer haven't come out with new guidelines. They're not referencing new guidelines. They're saying Bonnie Henry says it was miraculous. I don't know, man. I don't know. Seems sketchy to me. So here is Laurie Goldstein. He says, Trudeau talking about vaccines is like the Wizard of Oz talking about his power. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. AstraZeneca vaccine not recommended for people 65 and older. Canada's National Advisory Committee on Immunization. So the other day, AstraZeneca was just approved for use in Canada, and they were all excited about that. And then right after that, it was found that the AstraZeneca vaccine didn't have the data to support efficacy for anybody over 65 because they didn't test enough people in that cohort. So it's not to be used for people over 65. So that's interesting. And this is in response to the email I showed you earlier, or the Blacklocks reporter thing I showed you earlier about misleading the public over the pandemic response. Here's a specific instance. Instead of received, they recommended the use of the word secured from a government memo re PPE procurement. And they say, I've long rallied about the use of secured throughout the COVID thing. It was picked up in the fall by Minister Awan, and with a vengeance. I said it at the time and say it now, secured means nothing. So sure, they may have secured, like, oh yeah, sure, I'll give you 100 doses. All right, great, we'll send the money. But it's not actually going to be received until 2 years, 3 years. The agreement could be muddy, and they know this. That's why they did the language to talk around it. That's why they specifically had words that they could use that are kind of ambiguous. They mean we mean this. You could take it to mean that, but we mean this, right? Like that's how they sneakily get it through. That's how people. That's how politicians say what you want. you want them to say, right? Like when they say we're gonna fight this, you say yeah we are, and when you think we're gonna fight this, and when they think we're gonna fight this, different, right? But we're gonna fight this together. Sure we are, right? Sure we are. Here is how we're treating people in -10 temperatures. There's a long lineup outside. This is healthy. This is healthy and safe. I don't see how. What's the case on, standing in the cold is great for people who are waiting for vaccinations. This is more safe than being inside and if being socially distanced and masking works, why are we all waiting outside? It seems like a reasonable question. This seems insane. This seems like punishment for something, right? Here's the president of the Toronto Police Services, I believe. Yeah, Toronto Police Association, excuse me. And he says frontline members come into daily contact with high-risk individuals, putting them in harm's way. The vaccine helps to alleviate the risk, providing protection for those who protect others, and ensuring frontline services and public safety are not impacted. I'm interested with if the vaccine doesn't stop transmission, or people like transmission is giving it and getting it, and it doesn't really change the symptoms other than making it less bad, but gives you symptoms when you get the vaccine. What's the point? Like back to the opening meme, right? If you could take a contraceptive vaccine where you also had to wear a condom and it didn't actually protect and you could still get pregnant, would you take that vaccine? Like, what's the point? Why? Why are we doing this again? Okay, Gulag hotels. This woman, Ontario woman, forced to pay $3,458 hotel quarantine bill for one night. Yay. And she was attending her father's funeral. So she returns and has to spend nearly $4,000. This is liberal fixer and commenter. She's always on the talk shows and stuff, right? If you've got to have an uncomfortable opinion, have a pretty lady deliver the uncomfortable opinion. So she is said pretty lady, and she will tell anybody any liberal talking point ever. So it's interesting to note when she's breaking the fourth wall, I guess, and breaking character a little bit to call Trudeau out. She says, this is indefensible and utterly embarrassing. An ill-conceived and poorly executed policy designed purely for optics. Ontario woman forced to pay $3,458 hotel quarantine bill for one night's stay after returning to Canada from her father's funeral. She said the point is not whether she should have traveled to the funeral. The policy is there to deal with travelers. The point is that it's supposed to be a COVID-controlled policy, not a money gouging policy. Being charged an exorbitant amount for 3 unused days is not the intended outcome. So it's funny when liberals break the script and they start pushing back against the bad policies. The bad policies aren't bad just for the reasons that she's outlined. They're bad for those reasons, but they're bad for other reasons too. They defy our basic charter rights, right? We shouldn't have to be spending money to come home to Canada. And yet the COVID hotels aren't even safe. This is the same COVID hotel where I believe at least one sexual assault. I thought the other one happened at the person's home. So this is 2 girls. They're in a COVID hotel, and they show, my mouse disappeared, hold on. And they show, first I'll show you this video. They show the lock being removed from the door. So that's interesting in and of itself, right? So there's no lock, and she tries to get in, and she says, you need a key to get in. And then she pushes the door, and it opens. So I'm not sure if there's a key needed or what. And then somebody, sorry, my mouse is being all weird. Somebody knocks and opens their door while she's doing this live stream. Here we go.
Okay. Ding, ding, ding. What's my airport clothes again?
But it's bigger than a toonie. What the fuck?
Excuse me?
Yo, somebody just opened our door.
Yo, someone just opened the door. Look, it's on video.
What the fuck? Yo!
Yo! Excuse me?
So, I mean, that's weird, right? And 2 guys come back and they say, we didn't open your door. They ran around the corner. We didn't open your door and whatever. Weird, right? There's problems there, issues. Here's Kian. Kian went into the belly of the beast, and he's saying there are lots of reasons that these COVID jails are wrong. It's a violation of several personal liberties. It's outrageously expensive. It's less safe than me just going straight home too. But the food, this is exceptionally bad. Ice cold and stale. Gross. I don't see food there. That's gross. That's awful, right? Welcome to Canada, eh? We used to be a respectable country. Holy smoke. The federal government let people out of prison due to the risk of COVID, of the virus, and is forcing people into quarantine hotels due to the risk of virus. How does that make any sense? Here, let's walk through a little history of people being let out of prison. On April 9th, more than 2,000 inmates released, 6 COVID-19 cases confirmed inside jail cells. Oh no, right? Oh no, jails are dangerous. Jails are dangerous. We can't have jails. August 12th, provincial jails released thousands of inmates amid calls to slow the spread of COVID-19. Now, they released thousands already, right? So this could just be reporting the same 2,000. I don't know if it's more, 6,000. 6,000 fewer inmates in Canadian institutions. So, yeah, but if you're a returning traveler, you're going to jail, buddy. Sorry about your luck. If 40,000 people arrive in Canada by air, how many quarantine hotel rooms are needed to accommodate these travelers? Does the hotel industry have capacity? Did the Trudeau government secure these quarantine hotels for full capacity? This is what the media needs to ask. Are hotels that provide quarantine rooms entirely closed to regular customers? Are hotel staff adequately trained and equipped in handling a supposedly deadly pandemic? This whole COVID thing is rotten to the core. Yeah, like hotels? What? Hotels where you have to go down to the lobby? I showed a clip yesterday where people were lining up for food? What? Here's another one. Vancouver hotel to be converted to 65 units for homeless people. What could possibly go wrong? We've got hotels for travelers that they have to stay in overnight, right? They're locked in with no locks. We've got hotels for homeless people. Canadians are punished and forced to pay money to return home. Unbelievable, right? Here is, can you trust the Prime Minister? This is 5 minutes, and this is kind of an interesting interview. Yeah, that's right, interestingly interesting. To listen to. I hope I didn't lose the cue. I think I lost the cue. Anyway, I think it's around here, 412. They're talking about that nobody seems to be in charge of this Liberal government. Nobody seems to really have a pulse on who's in charge. And they're kind of flying by the seat of their pants. Here we go.
And it's possible when you go through hundreds of thousands of pages, and we have, of their text, emails, and records, you can actually see how they roll over the course of a workday. And you know what strikes you? This is the Prime Minister's office of a G7 country, Linda. Mm-hmm. No one's in charge. They're buried in minutia, but nobody's really in charge. Pandemic, recession, and that was the Prime Minister's office.
Oh my goodness.
Buried in minutia means buried in details. Like, how racist is the far right? And are they terrorists? That's the only thing that but the minutia, I'm just making a joke about that, but the minutia is the details, right? Like, how many masks? Oh, we can't signal that way, blah, blah, blah. But they're not actually looking at the bigger picture. I enjoyed Trump's presidency because he seemed to understand that there's a bigger picture, there's a bigger game board that you're playing on. And it seems like the people, and this is what he's saying, the people who are in charge don't seem to understand that there's a bigger game board to be playing on. Well, maybe they understand that the decisions that they make are going to impact Canadians, but I don't think that they understand that there's a broader geopolitical entity called the rest of the world. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what they're missing, but they seem to have massive blind spots, and the massive blind spots show up in like Meng Wanzhou, right? Like international incidents, right? Like, oh, the two Michaels, and I mean, we're so far away from the problems that we had in 2018. We had a $20 billion deficit in 2018, and the debt was. We had almost no debt. I think it was just a deficit. It was just this spending, right? I don't know what the debt was. I should know what the debt was. But now we're at almost $2 trillion, right, in debt. We're at $1.8 trillion or something like that right now, and we've got a $300 billion plus deficit at the federal level, and we've got a $300+ billion deficit at the provincial level in Ontario, right? And what are the fixes for this? Like, that's the kind of geopolitical stuff that I think that our leadership is really missing. Like the locking everyone in their homes to keep everyone safe doesn't seem to be working at all, right? It just seems to be exacerbating problems, creating problems that are that we could, that now we'll need to fix. Creating problems like massive debt, creating problems like mass homelessness, or people depending on a homelessness industry that I highlighted yesterday that seems to be eating money in an unending way, doubling the workforce or increasing by at least half the workforce in a year, doubling their purse. It's crazy, the amount of money that it takes to run the industry, the hotel beds and the meals and the everything for largely people who didn't call Toronto home for the last 12 months. 40% of refugees. If you take the 40% of refugees out of the equation, then I think something like 30% of those people who are being served are not from Toronto. So, there's some real problems with the management, some real problems with how we fit in. And wanting to do really well isn't enough sometimes. Like, you can want to do really well and still do badly, and sometimes you get judged on your results. And these people should be judged on the results. The public health officers should be fired. People who advocate for abuse of children should be removed from any kind of power positions. And the people who obviously can't run the country well should step down, because they should want the best for the country. But hey, that's just my interpretation. I think that they think that what they're doing is the best. And I think that they think they're quite competent, and there's no indication that the money is going to run out. There was no indication that the cost of borrowing is going to increase. So, just get it all in there, all that money in there, right? When you got ACEs, you just push it all to the center. And the ACEs is the debt people willing to give you more money, I guess. I'm not sure. Yesterday, there was an exchange between Pierre Poilievre and the jobs minister. I think it was the minister for jobs. And they're talking about calculating the unemployment rate between Canada and the U.S. And the minister, or the person who answers Mr. Poilievre's question, says the minister, Poilievre, knows that the United States and Canada calculate it differently. And Poilievre responds with, yeah, but we actually do the calculation the same way, and this is the result. Like, they actually put it out. Canada, StatsCan, or whoever calculates this, puts out the American calculation and equates it, right? So you can compare apples to apples, and this is what the apples to apples look like. 8.2% unemployment is where we're at, or the jobless rate. It is StatsCan. And so here's Poilievre's tweet. He says, liberal embarrasses himself when blaming our high jobless rate on different methods of counting joblessness between Canada and the U.S. Turns out StatsCan aligns methodologies apples to apples here, and he's got that there. So it's an interesting exchange, but that's the meat of it. And I mean, again, I feel like arguing over percentages is minutia. That's the details that don't matter. When you're missing the bigger picture, you're missing the bigger game, missing the bigger impacts, right? Like, if all of that 8.2% is in tourism and travel, like, is that going to be a massive impact? Or if a large percent of that is in one industry, is that going to be impactful? Is that worth knowing, right? It's just, there's so much that I think is being missed. But I don't know it all. I certainly don't know it all, right? I'm not I'm just a guy in my garage, but I feel like I would focus on different things. And the constant focus on racism, or the constant focus on all this distractionary stuff, a couple of percentage points when we're talking about maybe an entire industry, right? It seems like it's a distraction. It seems like, look at this and not that, right? A magician's trick, right? Like, look over here while I fix something over here, right? Like, I don't know. It seems that's what it seems to me. This is crazy. Like, this is all of this. It was This could lead the show easy, right? Like, this, I think, is an important issue. Moving into Chinese Communist Party. This is an MP, a sitting MP, currently member of Parliament for Calgary Forest Lawn, and CPC MP. And while this is, I'll just show you the question. Trudeau doesn't answer it. He doesn't even address it. But it's a very pertinent question.
But it was reported by the Globe and Mail that members of the Chinese Communist Party work in the visa office. Mr. Speaker, state-owned companies with a specific number of party members have to follow rules that allow the Communist Party to influence management. This is extremely concerning. Why is the Prime Minister willing to risk having our visa office influenced by the Chinese Communist Party?
Honourable Prime Minister. Speaker, like I said, we take the privacy of applicants very seriously. All third-party contractors undergo rigorous screening. Officials regularly carry out thorough inspections and audits to ensure compliance to Canada.
So it's not exactly a pivot, but he's saying, oh, we comply with all the security, and he says other people use these contractors too, so it's not that bad. I can't tell if this is just regular government. If this is CPC framing the question one way and Trudeau trying to pivot it, or if it's him trying to weasel out of answering the question with regards to the CCP. But that's an explosive statement. I don't have the Globe and Mail article, but if the Globe and Mail is reporting that members of the Chinese Communist Party work in Canadian visa centers. Visas are access to the country, right? So if you can give out access to the country or limit access to the country to who you choose, that's problematic, because that's problematic, right? And if you're giving that choice to CCP operatives, even worse. So having Trudeau talk about the standards and privacy standards of and other people using these people too, doesn't speak necessarily to the Globe and Mail's allegations, right? So it's non-answers, but that's usual, right? That's usual. State media, says Mr. Polyev, who in my opinion are PMO mouthpieces, are out beating the drum for an early election today with the worst joblessness, deficit, and vaccine rates in the G7. We should be talking about Trudeau's resignation, not a promotion. Trudeau's looking for a majority so he can continue his spending unchallenged. Unchallenged, I guess is the best way to do it, or say it. And I mean, he's been largely unchallenged up till now. He hasn't released a budget, and he's been given basically a blank check to manage COVID with. And I mean, where has it gotten us? A great reset feeling lockdown. Yep, it doesn't feel great. Not so good. Here is. I'll start with this, and we'll go into what Ontario is announcing. Quote, nothing in the history and current practice of mathematics justifies the notion that it is in any way different or dependent on the particular race or ethnic group engaged in it, writes Princeton professor Sergei Kleinerman. I think that's how you say that, Kleinerman. And the title is, There's No Such Thing as White Math. Math is math, right? If you have two widgets and you take one widget away, it doesn't matter what skin color you have, it's going to be one, right? So the idea that the product depends on skin color is faulty, in my opinion. And I think that it's strange to have support doled out in monetary fashion for specific races. So here's the Ontario news release. Ontario increasing support for Black students. This is March 1st, 2021. So this is yesterday that they announced this. Where's the increased support for and it's $6 million. The Ontario government is investing $6 million over the next 3 years to help Black children and youth achieve their educational and career goals by creating the Student and Family Advocates Initiatives in Ottawa, Hamilton, and GTA. So when we prioritize by race and not need, I don't think that helps. I think it's a miss. I think it's poorly done. Why is there an increased supports for Asian students? Is there increased supports for Indigenous students? Is there increased supports for Indian students? Is there increased supports for white students? Can you ask that question? This video has now been demonetized on YouTube. I'm just saying though, right? Like, why Black students, right? If you just, okay, let's pretend just for a second, instead of this news release saying Ontario increasing supports for Black students, it said Ontario increasing supports for Asian students. Would people be up in arms, right? What about if it just said for white students? Would people be up in arms then? How about if it just said for Indigenous students? Would people just kind of take it and say that's fine? I think that it's faulty that we're building race into education funding. What in the heck kind of madness has overtaken this province? We used to be rational. This is crazy. Okay? This is crazy. Last story for this morning, and it's Facebook. This is from 2018. There's a lot of talk and kind of posturing around Facebook with regards to paying for the news and having Facebook pay like the newspapers for access to their news or something like that. And Facebook kind of flipped the script in Australia and said, okay, we'll just block the newspapers from linking to us. Like we just won't link to them. No problem. Like we can solve this. We're not going to give you any money. We just won't link to them. Ha. And that stifled their whole plan. So the Australian government had to like lure Facebook back and like, oh no, it'll be good for everybody, right? Basically, don't you understand what kind of scheme we're trying to run here, right? And so Facebook's back in the fold. But make no mistake, Facebook has had access, and access is really the thing. If you can talk to somebody and make your case to them, you're more likely to have them on your side than if you send them an email or something to that effect. So having access, and this is a CTV article saying Facebook executive and ex-Liberal advisor defend his access to Trudeau cabinet. Access is important because you can field your ideas. Remember, they didn't register as lobbyists. They weren't registered as lobbyists. They weren't going through the motions. They had access. They had a direct email to Morneau. Come on to our Africa trip, man. You can help us open a school or two. Do you want your plaque on it? Pretty sure we could do it. They're like Velcro, right? Right. So access, right? Access. And what do you peddle with access? Your ideas, right? Your ideas. Ideas make the world go round, don't they? And so access. And when you have government that is willing to play ball with people like that and share ideas, share all those ideas, then you've got a partnership, right, for silencing anybody who disagrees with you. And once you cement that, it's going to be a really, really hard, long trip to get out of it, right? You don't usually vote your way out of that. Hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful